Let us talk about the baseline studies. A baseline study is the study of the current status of the environment in the area proposed for the development before the project started. It provides information regarding the existing conditions of the environment, and these informations provide a snapshot of the environmental conditions, which later shall serve as the baseline or the reference for whatever data collected at the later stage of the constructions, so that any changes due to the project can be traceable. Now, these baseline studies will identify the key issues likely to be faced due to the proposed project, and then there will be collections of data in order to objectively represent the conditions of the environment for future references. Next, when the baseline study is conducted, the baseline study is normally conducted after the terms of references has been endorsed by the Departments of Environment. You know that the environmental impact assessment comprises two main parts. The first milestone, it will be the terms of reference. While preparing the terms of reference, we identify the objectives, the scopes, the boundaries, the potential impacts, as well as the methods to be carried out during the environmental impact assessment studies at the later stage. It is like providing a proposal to the Departments of Environment, demonstrating the intentions as well as the directions of the environmental impact assessment for the project. The terms of reference will need to be reviewed by the Departments of Environment to see if it fits the proposed project, as well as whether the relevant concern associated to the environmental issues can be properly and adequately addressed through the environmental impact assessment later. There may be inputs from the Departments of Environment, resulting slight modifications of the terms of references. The DOE may also reject the proposed terms of reference if deemed to not meeting the requirements or unable to address the environmental concern related to the development project. Now, once the terms of reference being approved, that means the EIA studies can be proceeded. As a result, detailed informations are to be incorporated in the EIA report, and this shall involve the data collections for the baseline study. This outlines the main areas to be covered by a typical baseline study, such as the physical conditions, environmental conditions, biological, social economics, cultural or heritage, and others. The list is not exhaustive. There may be other aspects needs to be considered during the baseline study. Also, not all the items listed are applicable to all the EIA studies. That's why it is important to identify the key issues likely to be faced due to the project, and therefore in-depth study will be required to represent the baseline conditions related to the key issues. To make it simple, the baseline data are normally collected covering the three major environmental components, which are physical chemical environment, biological environment, socio-economic environment. The guideline provides some scopes and requirements for the environmental baseline. These are the aspects to be considered. The scopes and requirements as well as relevant agency for references. It may involve the terrain, where there should be descriptions of the existing topography based on the land and hydrographic surveys, slope analysis, and then geology and soil, looking into the soil and geology conditions, analysis of the soil profile as obtained from the soil investigations, estimations of the soil loss and sediment yield due to the project site, and the geotechnical report. Next is about the hydrogeology, regarding the groundwater quality sampling, hydrogeological assessment, hydrology, descriptions of the hydrological system within and surrounding the project site, identifications of the downstream risk sector, flood risk analysis, water quality, sampling and analysis of water quality of waterways and water bodies within the zone of impact, and then air quality, sampling and analysis of ambient air quality of the project site and nearby sensitive risk sector, noise level and vibrations, measurements and analysis of ambient noise and vibrations levels of the project site and the nearby sensitive risk sectors. Waste. This includes the estimations of the amounts of biomass waste generated from site cleaning, estimations of the amount of solid waste generated from the project site, identifications of the potential scheduled waste generated from the project site, and others. About land use, descriptions of the existing and future land use within the zone of impact and zone of study, identifications of the environmental sensitive areas (ESA) and impact risk sector, as well as zoning compatibility assessment. Regarding the climates, obtain long-term, at least 5 years climate data to define the weather patterns of the project site. Ecology, we are referring to the habitat. Social economy, data on demography, socio-economic profile of the stakeholders within the zone of impact. Populations and housing census data, and the findings of the social impact assessment, if the soil impact assessment is carried out separately. It may also involve history, culture, and archaeological aspects. Land traffic, informations on the existing traffic within and surrounding the project site, the findings of the traffic impact assessment, if any, infrastructures, utilities, and amenities, to see the availability of the existing and future utilities such as water, electricity, sewerage, waste management, road network, telecommunications, study of the discharge point of the sewerage and effluent, and etc. What you see here, there is quite a thorough list of various aspects that you can study to represent the baseline, which is the current conditions of the environment and the areas due to the development. This will have to involve more than one government agencies, which the guideline provide you the relevant agencies interested on different aspects. This gives you a thorough list that you can study for the EIA study. You might not need to have every single aspect covered depending on the needs of the project. For example, the history, cultural and archaeological may not be relevant for most of the project. As a result, the relevant aspect can be excluded. Among the typicals include the soil erosions and sedimentations, the hydrological system, and the potential risk due to the flood, water quality, air quality, noise level, waste management, probably the ecology, socio-economic impacts. Next, we talk about the source of data. There are two types of data source. First is the primary data. Second is the secondary data. The primary data involve the on-the-ground survey and sampling programs at the site. Now, the boundary of the sampling shall be within the project zone of impacts. We talk about the principles of the zone of study and the zone of impacts. Let's say now this is your project boundary. Your zone of studies, it will be within 5 kilometers distance from your project boundary. This will represent the boundary of most of your study for your development project. However, you know that the impacts of your project can exceed the zone of study, which can be greater than 5 kilometers from your project boundary. Under some circumstances, sampling may also be required within the zone of impact, as you cannot simply ignore the impacts to the regions beyond the zone of study. Now the question here is, under what circumstances you will have to do sampling and study for the zone of impacts? You may refer to the requirements. Normally it will indicate to you, for example, the water quality. You are supposed to do sampling and analysis of the water quality within the zone of impacts. That means if you are studying the water quality, it shall not be limited to your project site. It is also not limited to the zone of study, which is 5 kilometer distance from your project site. The impacts of the water quality may go beyond the zone of studies. Therefore, a simple rule of thumb, depending on the aspects that you are studying, you will need to first identify the potential impacts and the extent of the impacts to know the zone of impacts. That will set the boundaries of your study and sampling as far as the primary data is concerned. And then the sample collected must be analyzed by the accredited laboratory under the scheme Akreditasi Magma Malaysia (Eng-aim). This is to ensure the reliability of the result obtained for the EIA studies. Now the details of sampling, which include the person in charge, time, date, and locations of sampling, must be clearly stated. All certificates and data shall be included. Another source of data, it will be the secondary data. This represents any data or informations other than those collected directly from the site or from the zone of impact. Now, when talk about the secondary data, we will need to also ensure the reliability of the data. Therefore, the data will have to come from the official sources. and the source of information must be clearly stated along with the date of publications. It is recommended that the secondary data will have to be within 5 years from the dates of the study. They may be concerned of the outdated informations, which may undermine the credibility of the EIA report. Exceeding 5 years, there may be concerns of the inability of those secondary data representing the actual conditions at the current stage. Some changes due to various factors that may cause the outdated data not being able to fully represent the actual conditions of the environment for the EIA studies.